So this book has been years in the making. It took me about 5 years to complete it. It's over 500 pages long, and I want to go over some of the basic ways to understand how to use it and what you can get out of it, so you understand what's in it and how to use it properly. Now, of course, you do need more training than just what I'm going to give you tonight, but this will give you the basis to be able to use it at least in a way that will give you some benefit. So this is Schuessler. Cell salts are sometimes referred to as the Schuessler salts. He was a medical doctor, a German medical doctor back in the 1800s. And I will cut this all short, just not go into too much of the technical details about this. But he was also a homeopath. And he did something that was quite brilliant, but very simple. And what he decided to do is he took human remains, the various organs of a human being, let us say the heart, breast milk, well, that's not human remains, breast milk, nerve tissue, bone tissue, kidney tissue, and so on and so forth. And he cremated them individually. When you cremate living tissue, or what was once living tissue, all the organic matter disappears, burns away, and all that's left are the minerals, because minerals require tremendously high heat to destroy. And what he found is that 12 different compounds, mineral compounds, and a compound is basically two chemicals bonding together forms a compound. And in this case, these are salts, which is a combination of a positively charged chemical and a negatively charged one. And when they bond together and form a bond, they form a neutral compound. And these are called salts, without getting too chemically technical about all of this. And basically what he found was that certain tissues, some of these 12 cell salts were much more prominent. Other tissues, other cell salts were far more prominent. And he came to the conclusion, well, you know, if the nerve tissue, for instance, has all this potassium phosphate in it, we should be able to charge up the nerve tissue using that particular mineral salt. After all, why is it there if it's not necessary for function? If heart tissue has a specific salt more prominently in it, let's use that particular salt. So he came up with this entire system of using these 12 mineral salts that he found in these various tissues to treat symptoms associated with those tissues. For example, potassium phosphate, which in homeopathic terminology is caliphos or calcium phosphoricum, was found, and magnesium are strongly present in muscle and nerve tissue. Potassium chloride, which is called calimur or calimuriaticum, is more prominent in the mucous membranes, and calcium phosphate or calc-phos is found in bone. So based upon these particular discoveries, he came up with this, or developed this whole system of medicine. And this is the list of the 12 cell salts, starting with calcium chloride alphabetically and going all the way through to silica. Now, at the time that he was making these discoveries, Virchow, who was a famous pathologist, physiologist back in the day, was discussing cell theory, had come up with his cell theory about how basically that everything or every activity of body stems from the cells. You have to work and understand the cells. So Schuessler was very intent upon feeding these cells. So in the Biochemic System of Medicine, a book that I used as a reference for my book, Dr. George W. Carey writes, Virchow clearly demonstrated that the cells that build the human form select their own nourishment from available nutrients, and that nothing foreign to their constituent parts can be forced upon them except to produce injury or death. This is the mistake, of course, that allopathic medicine has been making for hundreds of years, is that instead of feeding the cells to help the cells overcome disease, through their own means, they're feeding toxic substances into the body, things that are not natural to those cells, in order to destroy or interfere with pathological processes. And as we see, Dr. Carey is saying here, that nothing foreign to the constituent parts of the cell can be forced upon them except to produce injury or death. And that is why every single drug in the allopathic Materia Medica is rife with side effects. So Schuessler actually believed that these cell salts were central to the cell function, and that the salts had to engage directly with diseased or devitalized cells. So that when you had diseased or devitalized cells, you would use these cell salts to reverse that process. Now, he was a homeopath, and as a homeopath, he decided to prepare these cell salts in homeopathic dilution. And homeopathic dilutions can be quite high. For instance, for the brain circulation blend that we just did, which we did a homeopathic dilution of 4x, that's actually a 1 to 10,000 dilution, 1 part of the oil blend to 10,000 parts of the alcohol water solution. The way you know in the X series what your dilution is by the number. So if it's a 4x, it's got 4 zeros, which is a 1 and 4 zeros, which is 10,000. If it's a 6x, it's 1 and 6 zeros, which is a 1 to 1 million dilution. A 3x is a 1 to 1,000 dilution. So the number tells you the number of zeros in relation to the 1 for your dilution. Now, why did he want to do this in homeopathic form? Why didn't he just give the cell salts in their macromolecular form? And based upon an understanding that's very important to really digest, is this one that I'm going to quote here from a 19th century German biochemist named Justus von Liebig. And I'm quoting it. It happens that a tissue in disease reaches a degree of density, becomes so clogged that the mineral salts of the blood cannot enter the cellular milieu to feed and nourish. In other words, those various cell salts which occur in food may very well be in your blood, but because in disease, the fluids around the cell, the extracellular matrix, which we'll be discussing later in relation to the lymphatic system, becomes so clogged with toxins, so congested, that these large molecular substances, macromolecular substances, cannot get through the logjam. But the dilution can. So to continue with Liebig's quote, but if for therapeutic purposes, a solution of a cell salt be given so diluted that all of its molecules are set free, it is presumable that no hindrance will be in the way of these molecules to enter the abnormally condensed part of the tissue. So if you're diluting something down to 1 to 1 million, so where now you just have just a few molecules that are getting through there, they're going to be able, they're so small, it's so minute, they'll be able to weave their way through the logjam and get into the cells. And because cells are so small, they're microscopic, maybe all you need is a few molecules to start to effect a type of change. So that is the reason why the cell salts are given in homeopathic dilution. Now, at one time, when I first started practicing, you could get a 3x, a 1 to 1,000 dilution, 6x, 1 to 1 million, 12x, which is 1 with 12 zeros after it, and even a 30x, which has 30 zeros after it. But now the market has condensed and you can basically only get the 6x. Now, somewhere along the line, I will teach you how you can take your 6x tablets and make them into 12x, 7x, 8x, 12x, whatever you'd like, 30x. But for right now, you'll be working with the 6x, the 1 to 1 million dilution. So now let's move along here and I'll show you some of the things that you can find in the book. This is some of the homeopathic information here that tells you what the dilutions are. And one of the things you will get out of this book is that I had this revelation that there are 12 cell salts and there are 12 acupuncture meridians. So it seemed to me that spirit was communicating something, that each of these cell salts would be specific for one of the 12 acupuncture meridians. And so I sat down to really determine and figure out, well, what would they be? Which cell salt matches which meridian? And in this book, it tells you which they are. And based upon that, you can do some very interesting things with the cell salts. And let's just take a look at what some of those are. Now, the chi that runs through the acupuncture meridians, for those of you who are not familiar with what acupuncture meridians are, is the difference between life and death in a human being is something intangible. It's a force. It's not substance. It's energy. In naturopathic medicine, homeopathic medicine, this is referred to as vital force. In Chinese medicine, vital force is referred to as qi. In Ayurvedic medicine, it's referred to as prana. But it's all basically the same thing. Now, this qi, when we're looking or speaking in terms of the organs, flows to the organs along channels, specific channels or meridians that go in a specific pathway to that organ. And as it turns out, this chi, this vital force, surges in each of those organs for a 2-hour period in the 24-hour cycle. So let's take a look at that and see what that means. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a picture that shows you the meridians. There's this inside circle here, for instance, it says bladder, kidney, sex circulation, which is pericardium, thyroid adrenal, which is going to be the triple burner, gallbladder, liver, lungs, large intestine, stomach, spleen, heart, and so forth. And as you can see here, this is the clock time. So this is the top of the clock here. This is 12 o'clock. And basically, between 11 and 1 during the day, it's the chi surges in the heart meridian. Then between 1 and 3, it's in the small intestine meridian. Between 3 and 5 in the bladder meridian. Between 5 and 7, kidney meridian, and on and on and on during this whole cycle. So basically, what that told me was, if there's a cell salt that I am associating with a specific meridian, let's say, for instance, the heart meridian, in this case, it's going to be calcium fluoride, then wouldn't it make sense, if you're going to dose someone, to make sure you're dosing them between 11 and 1? Give them at least 1 or 2 doses during the period when the heart chi is surging. If you're having bladder infection and you want to try to work on that bladder infection, this is not to say you don't use a cell salt at other times. You just make sure you give a concentrated dosing during that period. If you're having bladder issues like a bladder infection and the bladder is surging with chi between 3 and 5 p.m., then why not give a dose at 3 and another dose at 4 and maybe another dose at 5? Give 3 doses during that period and spread the rest of your doses out during the day. So one of the things that I developed was a meridian clock dosage pattern for the cell salts. Now this comes in really handy at night. So here we see is the bottom of the clock. This is midnight down here. And you can see between 11 and 1 is gallbladder meridian. Okay, so you're one of the many millions of people, that high percentage of adults, who doesn't sleep well. You either have difficulty getting to sleep, or you wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep. And there's various things that you can do for that. I'm not saying cell salts are the answer for that. There are other things you need to do for that as well. But cell salts could be one of the pieces that you can put together in this protocol to help you sleep better. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock and you're wired. You can't get to sleep. You can't stop thinking. You ate too late, and it's interfering with your nerve flow and so forth. The gallbladder meridians act as most active between 11 and 1 a.m., 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The cell salt for the gallbladder is calcium sulfate, calc salt. So instead of taking the traditional remedy for sleep at this time, the traditional cell salt remedy for sleeping is Caliphos, potassium phosphate. And many people will take it and not get any results. So I have started to instruct my clients and the people. I say, well, look, if it's between 11 to 1 that you can't sleep, even though the cell salts Materia Medica do not mention calcium sulfate in relation to sleep, let's go ahead and take calcium sulfate between 11 to 1. And people started doing that. They, okay, if they woke up, they would take the calcium sulfate between 11 to 1, or they fell asleep, but then they woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and couldn't get back to sleep. That's the lung meridian. Between 3 and 5 is the lung meridian. It's on the cusp of the liver meridian, which is between 1 and 3, and the lung meridian, which is between 3 and 5. So if it's right on this cusp, let's say 5 to 3, I would give the liver cell salt and then the lung cell salt. Nat salt, Cali salt, and so forth. So during the night, according to which period you're awake and cannot get back to sleep, you would choose that cell salt based upon which meridian is most active at that time. So I put together this diagram that makes it easy for you to know what to do. So you can see here, this is between 1 and 3 a.m. There's the cell salt. Liver, nat salt. Gallbladder between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. and so forth. And all the other hours at night. Then this is your dosing pattern during the day. Okay, I'm having kidney stones, or I'm having a kidney infection, or my kidneys are weak. My acupuncture is telling me my kidney meridian is weak. I'll take Caliphos in a concentrated way between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. So you're determining your dosages by nothing more than the time of day. You're determining which cell salt simply by the time of day. You do not have to know anything else about this cell salt except that. And so here's this diagram in the book, and you just reference it. You just go to it and you figure it out. Now, there's something interesting that some Japanese acupuncturists, I studied some of their writings, that they practice in a way that they came up with something interesting. And that is this. As you can see here, let's take an organ that everybody knows and understands. And so this would be the gallbladder. The gallbladder is between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. But look over here, we see that the heart is between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Let's take a look at the kidneys. The kidneys are between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. And the large intestine is between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. And these Japanese acupuncturists said, or theorized, that there is a distinct relationship in this polarity between the organ that's on the AM side in this 5 to 7 slot and on the PM side in the 5 to 7 slot. And they started treating on an acupuncture basis, they started treating kidney and large intestine in relation to each other because of these polar relationships, liver, small intestine, and so forth. And you can look at this diagram and see what the polar relationships are. Bladders between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. Lungs are between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. So you have a lung-bladder relationship, a gallbladder-heart relationship, a liver-small intestine relationship. So what's the value of this for you? The value of this for you is, if you got a liver issue going on and you're working liver, you're choosing the nat salt as your cell salt. But there's a polar relationship with small intestine. You can choose nat phos, the small intestine cell salt, to accompany your nat salt in your dosing. If your pattern, if you've decided that this is a pattern I want to experiment with, you can experiment with doing this binary type of matching of cell salts based upon these polar relationships. So that's what this diagram is very, very useful for, to show you all the polar relationships. So once again, going back to the sleep issue. Okay, it's 1 o'clock, let's say it's 2 o'clock in the morning. 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you woke up, forget it, you're not getting back to sleep. And so you say, okay, I'm going to take the net salt right here. Is there anything else I can do? Yes. Small intestine, polar relationship here between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. is nat phos. Okay, I'll take the nat salt, I'll wait about 10 minutes, and I'm going to take some nat phos based upon these polar relationships. So this is another very useful chart inside here to use. Now, this is the table that I put together for this that gives you the whole thing. So calc fluor is the cell salt you're working with. Let's not talk about, because of sleep. Let's just leave that part out of things for this discussion. You're working with calc fluor because you have some issues with your heart and you want to support the heart muscle. Calc fluor will strengthen the heart muscle. If the ejection fraction, in other words, if you're not pumping as much blood out of the heart as you want, your cardiac output is lower, your doctor says your cardiac output is less, or you have someone who's in the hospital and they're the cardiologist who comes by is checking these type of things. Oh, cardiac output is not what we would like. Then you're going to be looking at calc fluor. So you just go to this table. Okay, calc fluor, synergy, calc fluor, calc salt. That's your polar synergy right there. So it's all here for you in this one table as to which cell salts you would then pair up with your primary cell salt. Now, there are 12 cell salts, and of course, they're all in alphabetical order. And one of the things that I did at all of these is I'm giving you keynotes at the top of each chapter. So the first one, let's take calcium fluoride. I'm not going to go over the cell salt in detail. I'm just going to give you an idea of how these things work. So where did Schuessler find calcium fluoride most prominently? Well, he found it in the elastin tissue throughout the body, on the surfaces of the bones, the enamel of the teeth, and the skin cells. So what is elastin tissue? Elastin tissue is the type of connective tissue inside the body that gives the tissues elastic recoil. So if the tissue stretches, like a blood vessel opens up and expands, the elastin tissue will act like a rubber band and pull it back in. So you have that stretch and recoil, stretch and recoil. So what are some examples of when the elastin tissue is not being produced as much as you should be producing, or the elastin tissue has become very weak, in part because of the deficiency of calc fluor? Well, varicose veins. The veins should have a certain tone. The elastin tissue should keep the veins tight so that they don't bulge out through the skin. They're not prominent. And at the same time, they have the tension in them to move the blood. Well, if the elastin is deficient, then that vein will start to bulge. It'll just expand and stay expanded. It'll become loose and sloppy. This will be the same thing for any tissue in the body that has a lot of elastin, such as the heart. Another tissue in the body that has a lot of elastin is the skin. And so I'm sure you notice as you get older that you don't have the skin tone you had when you were 16 or even 25 or 30. By the time you get a few decades past that, there's a lot of sagging going on, a lot of sagging of the skin. And part of that is the elastin. The elastin fibers are not what they used to be. So on a purely cosmetic level, then calc fluor is an important cell salt for using just to look better. Now, if you're going to make some type of a preparation for the skin to help tone up the skin, some type of a cream or a salve or just the dilution of an oil blend, and I would add calc fluor into the cream. So for instance, one of the things that I'm working on now, and I'll share that formula with you when I'm done with it, is I'm working for, because I'm asked this a lot, And it seems all the products of this kind on the market don't work, except if they put chemicals into them, which I'm opposed to. And that is a cream or salve or cream to go under the eyes for people who have swelling under the eyes, eye bags. How do you get that down? Nothing seems to work. There's things that are promoted. You go to Amazon, you'll see 40 products up there that promise that. None of them really work. They will load them with caffeine. In some cases, that does have some effect, but who wants to do that to get transdermal absorption of caffeine into the body, especially on the head, right next to the brain? And if the person is already wired, it doesn't make much sense. So in that particular cream, I will be using the calc flora. I will be adding that in. Having problems with your teeth, the teeth are breaking down and they're not lasting. And one of the things you will see with older folks who in their youth, and I count myself among these, I grew up in the 1950s. And back in the 1950s, people didn't really know anything about teeth other than you had cavities, you went to the dentist. But other than that, there wasn't really the kind of understanding of oral hygiene that there is now. Back in Brooklyn, dentists didn't even have hygienists in their office back then. It wasn't even mentioned. And on the way out of the dental office, they'd give you a lollipop. So you'd start working on your cavities right away as soon as you had your cavities filled. By the time you're in your 30s, you're getting root canals because you've had too many cavities that you just can't drill anymore into it. And root canal teeth don't last forever. They're essentially a dead tooth. They're all essentially a disease-causing tooth, although dentists in this country will not admit to that. Infections build up inside that can have a systemic effect and cause problems throughout the body. I once went to a study in a course that was being taught by some German doctors that came over from Germany. And it was in large part, they were discussing cancer and how they treat cancer. And it turns out in Germany and other places in Europe, the integrative physicians, the doctors who use natural medicine as well as conventional medicine to treat cancer, all have dentists in their office. Dentists are part of their practice. So a cancer patient would come into the office, and I'll discuss this at a different time, but each of the teeth, each of the molars, each of the premolars and so forth is associated with a specific organ, almost like the reflex points on the bottom of your feet, the different areas on the bottom of the feet reflex to a specific organ. Well, each of the teeth reflexes to a particular organ. So let's say an individual came in and this individual has colon cancer. The first thing the medical doctor, who was the oncologist in this case, would do is send him across the hall to the dentist in his office. The dentist would examine the teeth, and if it was a root canal, he'd extract the tooth right away. Because the theory is that unless you remove that root canal tooth, you're not curing that cancer. So in often cases, even in this country, among integrative physicians who work closely with integrative dentists, they won't even begin to treat you till you had all your root canal teeth removed. Well, I digress. Nevertheless, as you're getting older, those root canal teeth are going to start to fall apart. They're going to become fragile, and they'll break easily. And if you're lucky, they'll break in the middle of the tooth. If you're not, they'll break at the root line, and you're going to have a heck of a time getting those out of there. So basically, if you have root canal teeth, you want to be using calc flora on a daily basis. Make sure that you are feeding whatever enamel you can get, you're replenishing of those teeth. Osteoporosis program, you want to put together an osteoporosis program in addition to all the nutritional supplements that you need, such as strontium, magnesium, boron, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, vitamin K2, MK7, and on and on and on. Cell salts are tremendously important in osteoporosis programs. And one of the central ones is going to be calcium fluoride because of the enamel of or I should say the surfaces of the bones. Calc phos is perhaps the major one, is calcium phosphate. You take that calcium phosphate and calcium fluoride, or calc fluor and calc phos together. So what are some of the keynotes? And this says deficiency keynotes. You look at this one paragraph here, and it tells you, well, what are some of the keynotes of not having enough calcium fluoride? Over-relaxation of elastin fibers. How can this present? Prolapses. So does it seem like not only do you have hemorrhoids, which is a varicose vein in the rectum is a hemorrhoid, but that hemorrhoid droops out through the anus and has to be pushed back in. That's a prolapsed vein. You go to you're going to urinate 20 times a day, and you're having problems with where you cannot hold sufficient urine in the bladder, and because there's pressure on the bladder sphincter. There is incontinence because not only is the bladder prolapsing, and you'll find prolapses is very common among people who are largely overweight, or the intestines are prolapsing down towards the pelvic floor. You need calc fluor to help with that. That would be something you want to work with for prolapses. Hardenings, for a whole different reason I won't get into today, but if you have any type of hardening, especially if it's like a swelling that has now become hard, or if it's a tumor that's a very hard tumor, then you're using calc fluor. Hemorrhage due to loss of tone. Hemorrhage due to loss of tone is going to be seen very frequently in overweight women who are still of menstrual age. So if they're overweight and they have lost tone in their uterine muscles because the elastin tissue is not what it should be, instead of having a 2 to 3 day spotting, which is what should be normal for the menstrual period, they just have a frank hemorrhage. It can go on for a week or so. And this is because they don't have enough tone in the elastin to reseal the blood vessels and the tissues of the uterus. Defective blood circulation and lymphatic drainage, because there's not enough tone in the veins and in the lymph vessels. And muscular weakness. The muscles are just flabby. All calc fluor. So I didn't mean to really get into it to that degree, but nevertheless, I got started, so I might as well have finished with it. So modalities. What is a modality? A modality is a homeopathic term, which means what are you better for or what are you worse for? For instance, are you worse for cold? When it's cold out, or you feel the house is cold and it's not really warming up, are your symptoms worse? Is your neck pain worse? Or during the hot weather, are your feet swell up more, so you're worse for hot, damp weather? Are you better for warmth? Are you worse for warmth? Are you better for hot applications or better for cold applications? So the modalities will help lead you to which of the cell salts to choose. So this tells you what the modalities for calcium fluoride are. Worse for humid conditions and damp weather. This is me. I went to Hawaii one time with my wife, and we went to the Big Island of Hawaii. And I guess it was the time of year. It was unbelievably humid. I could not move. I mean, it took me 10 minutes to make up my mind whether I wanted to stand up off the couch, and I had to sort of launch myself just to get going. That is worse for humid and damp weather, but better for warmth and massage. Now, notice it's the humid, not the warmth, that's causing the problem. It's the humid. This same person could be in Arizona where it's quite hot, but not humid, and be perfectly okay. So the person who needs calc fluor is better for hot applications, but is worse for cold and cold drafts, and should dress a little bit warmer. So if you have a calc fluor individual who underdresses, that person is going to have an aggravation of symptoms. If you have a calc fluor person who goes to the Caribbean and it's very humid, or Florida and it's very humid, they're not going to have a good vacation. It's going to be tough. Now he goes on to, well, what are the essential oils that I am associating with calc fluor? So you now know, okay, I need calc fluor. I read this chapter. This really sounds like something I really need. Can I use an essential oil too? Sure. Balsam fern spikenard. Tells you right here in this first, just in these first opening part of the chapter, tells you which oils to look at. Well, you know, it turns out there are 12 zodiac signs and there are 12 cell salts. And this is not something that I determined, by the way. The association of a specific sun sign with a specific cell salt has been around for a long time, at least for decades. And so I'm just going by the literature, the cell salt literature. So are you a Cancer zodiac sign? That's your sun sign, Cancer. Do you have any of these symptoms, any of these issues that you see here, any of these modalities? Then this really starts to highlight that, yes, indeed, you need Calc Flora, and you should take it on an ongoing basis every day. It's not going to hurt to take a dose or two every day. Cell salts are inexpensive, and they're very easy to take. You take them under the tongue, and they dissolve fairly instantly. So this first part of the chapter is very important. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole Acupoint part of this. This is something I will explain at a different point. I will come back. It will look, for those of you who are not familiar with acupoints and massage, I should say acupuncture theory, this is going to look like, like Chinese. It's in something you're not going to understand at all. But in about 15 minutes, I would be able to explain the whole thing to you. This is made for the layperson. This is not intended just for professionals. This is intended for you to be able to use. And there's a section in the book that tells you how to use it. It's just that simple. So, but I'm not going to go into it today, but I will say this much. What does that do for me if I know that for Calc Flora, I'm going to use Heart 3, the Acupoint Heart 3? What can I do with that? Few things. If you're going to use spikenard and balsam fir, because you're using Calc Flora, and you say, well, okay, well, what do I do with the balsam fir and the balsam fir and the spikenard? What am I supposed to do with it? Well, you can mix them together, make a 5% dilution or a 3% dilution, whatever you determine, and rub some of it into Heart 3 and rub some of it into Kidney 10. It's just that simple. It's all designed for you not to really have to have deep understanding, just enough understanding. And the rest is you can go right to the point of treatment immediately. So when you go to the chapters, you can, just by reading some of the materials that explain things, you can start working with it immediately. So you know which points to use. Now, another option is as well, okay, what else can I do with these points besides rubbing in oils? Well, you can take magnets. You can take, if you want to buy inexpensive magnets, get inexpensive neodymium magnets. Try to find some that are about a ½ an inch wide, no more than that. I know you can buy packages of 12 of them for about $15. They're not expensive. Just make sure when you buy them that they are clearly demarked north side N and south side S, because you're going to put the north side up against the skin. And you tape it on. There's a certain type of tape, 3M makes a tape, that you just cut a piece and you tape the magnet on. It's a special skin used for taping things onto skin. And you leave them on for a few hours or even overnight. And you take your doses of whatever cell salts, correlate with those points at the same time that you have these magnets taped on. Then you can take the magnets off and go ahead and take your oil blend that you made and rub it into those points. So now you're developing a protocol. So the question is, well, do I only use one cell salt at a time? And the answer is no. My suggestion is to try to figure out 3 cell salts that you need at any one point in time. And the book will help you do that. It's all in here of how you determine all of this. And then you'll have acupoints for each of those cell salts, oils for each of those cell salts, and you can start making a blend from the oils for each of those 3 into one blend. And you have magnets that you can then put on 6 different points. And now you have a protocol of magnets and oils and cell salts. And how long would it take you to be able to figure out how to do this? I guess, it would take you a couple of days of getting familiar with the book and going through it a few times and learning what you're doing and just spending a little time learning how to use a reference guide. before you be able to do this. This is not something where you're going to read all 500 pages and then you can start. This is a desktop reference guide. It's a reference book. It's not intended for you to memorize almost anything. All you want to do is highlight things in the chapter. Oh, calc floor for elastin. Oh, this and that. And you highlight with in PDF, they have a highlighter pen. And you can just highlight, yellow out what you want. And then when you scroll through the book with the ebook, it will be coming out in hard copy as well. In the ebook, you can just look at your yellow marks and say, okay, so I know how to use that. I know which points and so forth. And then it gives you all these graphic pictures, which demonstrates to you, like for instance, this is internal hemorrhoids. This is a hemorrhoidal vein inside here. This is internal. You can see it's lost its tone. There'll be bleeding from this hemorrhoid. Calc floor is very specific for the hemorrhoid. You can take it internally. You can also crush up a few of the tablets, put it into a little bulb syringe that you use to give a little baby an enema, one of those 2-ounce bulb syringes, put it in an ounce of cold water, and you can inject it rectally. Inject the cell salt rectally to treat hemorrhoids. You can put some oils in there as well, like cinnamon oil if it's bleeding. Cypress oil is very good, yarrow oil, and so forth. And this is just going, and you can start to see degrees of prolapse where the hemorrhoidal vein, and this is the anal opening right in here, the hemorrhoidal vein is starting to come out, protrude outside, and has to be pushed back in. Calc floor. So let's see if there's anything else in this chapter. Oh yes, this is an interesting part here. By the way, this is the section that tells you other symptoms associated with calc floor. Say, well, okay, so I know, I need it for this and I need, but is there anything else that may tell me whether I really need this? Let me look at some of the other symptoms associated with calc floor besides hemorrhoids, because I don't have hemorrhoids and I don't have varicose veins, but I'm feeling like I need it because of bones and teeth and so forth. Let me look. So you look at this section here and you can see here other symptoms of calc floor. Depression, sad and miserable. And here's a biggie. Anxiety about finances. Great insecurity, which you can tie to this, but they just feel insecure in general. And if they have money that's in the bank, then they feel more secure. But even with the money, they're going to feel insecure. Anxiety about the future, fear of misfortune, weakness in the morning, unrefreshing sleep, vivid dreams with a sense of impending danger, on and on. So now you're going, oh, wow, I got some of that. This is starting to sound a little bit more like me. Let me take a look at something else. So toothache with looseness of teeth, knots in the breast, fibroid cysts that are hard or hard breast tumors. This is one of the things you should always ask. When somebody reports, well, I have breast cancer. You want to figure out, well, what am I going to do? And one of the keynotes for that is, well, was it hard? And a lot of times the woman doesn't know because it was operated on before they really could palpate it that deeply. But in some cases, it's grown to a point that you can palpate it freely. Was it hard or was it soft or what was it like? If it's really hard, calc floor, the word hard is something you should think with calc floor. It's hard. Sluggish circulation. Here's another interesting one. Aneurysms. High blood pressure. Varicose or enlarged veins. Now, let's say you have some of these things, but now you have a cold and you're coughing and you're coughing up mucus. Can I determine this just by the mucus? Yes, you can. If the mucus discharge that you're coughing up, and I have a page of this that tells you all of this, thick, it's lumpy, it's yellowish green, you need calc floor. You can determine which cell salt to use by the color of the discharge, whether it's from your throat, your nose, vaginal. The color of the discharge tells you which cell salt to use. And there's a page at the end of this book, I believe, it's been a while since I looked at the whole book, that gives you which cell salt based upon the color of the discharge. Okay, so then you have, as we go down here, I don't have time to go through any more of this, the calc fluor individual. Who's the calc fluor type? And this is, what I've done here is I've taken my experience as a classical homeopath and I've combined it into knowledge about cell salts. In other words, there is a cell salt calc fluor and there's a homeopathic remedy calc fluor, which is used to treat a person on a deep constitutional level, whereas the cell salt is used to treat this individual on a more superficial symptomatic level. It's not being used to treat the whole case. It's being used for the hemorrhoids or for the teeth or the bones or whatever it's being used for, but not to try to treat this individual on a mind-body level and get them into a better place on both of those levels. Whereas the calcium fluoride homeopathic remedy is, if it's specific to this individual. So I took the understanding of how to use the cell salt by identifying who the calcium fluoride individual or type is, as described in classical homeopathy, and I built it into, well, is calc fluor the cell salt for me? Well, why wouldn't it apply? If you need calcium fluoride on a 1-to-1 million level to treat your physical symptoms, and it seems very specific for you, very prominent for you on an ongoing basis, sometimes on a lifelong basis, why wouldn't it apply that you may very well, in fact, be a calcium fluoride type? So who is calcium fluoride type? And in each of these cell salt chapters, it tells you who that individual, what that individual is like. So this is from the homeopath Rajan Sankaran, who I studied with. And he's one of the strongest influences on me in terms of homeopathically, and one of the strongest contributing influences to spiritual PhytoEssencing in terms of understanding how to correlate the homeopathic remedies with the various oils. So he writes about the calcium fluoride type. Calcium, calcarea, represents the need for stability and security, just like an oyster has a shell made out of calcium carbonate that protects it. The calcium type has this really strong need for stability and security. A lot of it has to do with the home. If the home is not the bastion of safety and security, this is a real problem for the individual. While fluoride represents the fear of being let down and deserted. The main feeling of calc fluor is that the person's source of security and support is unstable or unreliable. Hence, there is a need to be totally protected and secure by being hard and resistant. Fear of poverty is the main rubric of calcium fluoride. Now, I'm not going to continue to with this. This is not my object today to go into this in particular. But if you see this in yourself or somebody you know, and you read on, because there's more. It goes into it in more depth. If you read the rest of this, oh, this is really starting to sound like so-and-so, then you know that person needs calcium fluoride based upon their typology. So in each chapter, there is the typology. Who is the calcium fluoride type? Who's the potassium chloride type? And so forth. When all efforts to secure himself financially or in a relationship fail, calcium fluoride becomes totally irresolute, feeling most vulnerable and helpless. He can go into mental depression, a given up state. So is this the reason the person is depressed? And so instead of just giving some type of a remedy, general remedy for depression, you go ahead and say, well, wait a second, this is the reason why she's feeling so depressed. Financially things are not going well. The husband is not working. He's undependable in terms of bringing home any income. She's feeling very vulnerable. Life is just going to attack her. She has no defenses. She's helpless. She's getting depressed. I'm giving up. That's calcium fluoride. So you don't have the homeopathic remedy, calcium fluoride at home. You'd have to buy that. It's generally going to be as 12C, 50, 30C, 100C, 200C, 1M, so on and so forth. But you do have the 6X. You have the cell salts. Go ahead. Start using the cell salts until you get a higher potency. Start with the cell salt 3 or 4 times a day. Which oils go with this cell salt? Oh, yeah, that's right. Balsam fir and spikenard. I'll make a blend, and I'm going to put other things in there for depression, but I'm going to make sure I add in the spikenard and the balsam fir in with it as well. Now you can start working with this individual. And you know, with the heart, since calc fluor is for the heart, you know, the heart is really the seat of depression in a lot of people. So now you say, well, okay, so I'll give them cell salts and I'll make the blend and I'll tell them to rub it into this point and that point, and I'll show them where it is. So now you're in 15 minutes, by looking at this one chapter, you're able to do some effective treatment on somebody that you didn't have a clue for 15 minutes previously. Again, this is not designed for you to study for the next 3 years before you can use it. It's designed for you to be able to study right now and be able to use that same day. So this goes into the oils. They're all in here. They go into it. It shows you which rubrics in the repertory you would be associating with the calc fluor individual. It gives you all of that in here. Shows you some of the things that come up a lot for the calc fluor type. Osteoporosis, low blood pressure because the blood vessels are weak and can't hold their tension. Prolapse of the uterus, looseness of the teeth. And these are all rubrics from the Spiritual PhytoEssencing repertory of essential oils. Now, this is an interesting part of the book. Okay, I'm taking the cell salt. I have such and such a problem. Calc fluor is deeply involved in this. Are there any supplements or herbs that I can use? And I give you, yes, collagen would be one. And I give you a whole discussion on collagen. And then which ones to use, how to select collagen. Hawthorn berry would be another one for heart weakness. Okay, so it gives you a discussion of hawthorn. Horse chestnut, this would be for varicose veins and for hemorrhoids. Horse chestnut extract, which is an herbal extract. You could also use the homeopathic remedy Aesculus. And homeopathic remedy Aesculus in spiritual PhytoEssencing is associated with cypress oil. So if you're going to be using calc fluor, spikenard, and balsam fir, and you're going to make something for this individual for hemorrhoids and varicose veins, add in some cypress. But this is horse chestnut extract. And then as you go along in here, and you can see how much detail there is for each of these. Red raspberry leaf. This would be excellent for pelvic organ prolapse, especially prolapse of the uterus. Now here's something, I'm going to give you a $1 million piece of information that you probably already know, but I'm going to mention it again because it's worth $1 million. If you have a daughter or a daughter-in-law or know anybody who's pregnant, get them on red raspberry leaf tea early on, not in the last 6 weeks of pregnancy, but throughout the pregnancy. And in the delivery room, have them have some red raspberry leaf tea with them. Or one of my clients many years ago came up with this idea of making red raspberry leaf tea and then freezing it, make red raspberry tea ice cubes. And you will cut down on the amount of bleeding from the uterus tremendously. And the birth will be tremendously easier than it otherwise would be. And the uterus will recover much faster by the simple technique of using red raspberry leaf tea. So this is another thing. This is for pelvic prolapses, red raspberry leaf tea. Vitamin C for building collagen in the body. Witch hazel bark for hemorrhoids. Yarrow root for varicose veins, and yarrow oil as well for varicose veins and for hemorrhoids. Magnesium is very important for those type of things, and then it moves on to calc phos, the next cell salt, and begins all over again. Now I'm going to go to the end of the book here And it has the, by the way, it has the entire system of the CSCO method of how to figure out how to make an oil blend from which cell salts you need. And it gives you the complete entire discussion of that. I'll get down here. I'll make you a little dizzy getting there. Okay, we're still in the cell salt section here. Still going down. Now, each of the sections has all of that, all the supplementation, which herbs to use, which homeopathics, it's all in here. So once you know which cell salts you can use, you know exactly what can I choose from. This is sodium chloride, nat myrrh, and you can see blackstrap molasses. And okay, it goes on and on. Let's get to where I want to go. Royal jelly. By the way, royal jelly, people ask me, what do I do for hot flashes? My first go-to is vitamin E. My second go-to for hot flashes is royal jelly. And in this country, the company to buy royal jelly from is called Glory Bee, B-E-E, Glory Bee. They have the best royal jelly. You can get it by capsules. If you are postmenopausal and you want to support the estrogen production to make sure that you're still supporting your cardiovascular system and your bones and so forth, all those things that estrogen supports, royal jelly is something definitely to look at. Okay, so I'm moving on here now. And you can see this is a very long book. So let's get to where I'm going. And I'll show you some of the things at the end of the book. So we're still going. These are still cell salts. That is the last cell salt. This is silicia, which is silica. And it gives you the meridians and all the rest of this. And then it goes through here and it goes ahead, aloe vera juice, astragalus, tart cherry juice, and so on and so forth for various reasons as to why you would use all of these different things. And you would go through these sort of materia medica in each chapter and make a decision as to which one of these herbs or homeopathics or whatever I have in here you would use. Now, here's the tongue indications. This is really one of the really great little one-page guides in this book. Okay, you're having problems. You want to look at your tongue to see if any of these things fit. You can determine a cell salt just by looking at the tongue. All right, so do you have a bitter taste in your mouth? Does your tongue feel sort of tingly? Does it feel sort of thick or maybe stiff? Is it red at the tip of the tongue? Calc phos. Is your tongue cracked and looks sort of bright red? It has sort of a hardened quality to it? That's calc fluor. Some of the more common ones you're going to see is going to be the clean tongue, which means it has no coating on it, which indicates digestive weakness, by the way. It has no coating on it whatsoever. And if you look at the edge of the tongues, it has the impressions that like teeth, like crenellated all along the edges. That's mag phos. Is it brownish mustard color, the coating? It looks sort of brownish yellow. That's Kali phos. Is it yellow, brighter yellow, but slimy? And along the edges, it's whiter? That's Kali salt. Is it clear but slimy or watery and has sort of small bubbles like froth? That's nat myrrh. So just by looking at this one page and looking in the mirror or holding a mirror up to your tongue and looking at it, even though you know nothing else about the cell salt, you can choose a cell salt. This is the characteristic discharges. Okay, you've got a grandchild. Your daughter calls you and says, you know, Johnny's got a really bad cough, and you know, I don't really want to take him to the doctor. You know, I don't want to give him some drugs or something. You know, what can I give him? Do you know anything I can do besides vitamin C, which I'm already doing? First thing you ask is, well, is he coughing anything up? Is he bringing up? Oh, yes, he's bringing up mucus. Well, what's the color of it? Well, it's just clear. It doesn't really have a color. Is it thin or is it thick? Oh, it's thick. You know, it's thick and sticky. Calc phos. thick and clear discharge. Okay, what about if it's thick, but it's white? That's Kali myrrh. What if it's creamy yellow, like it's creamy yellow? Kali phos. It's clear, but it's not thick. It's thin and very watery. Nat myrrh. If your nose keeps running and it's clear and it's very thin, that's nat myrrh. So just by the discharges, the color of the discharge and the density of the discharge, you combine the density and the color, and you can determine a cell salt without even looking at the chapter. You can just go to this one page and determine which cell salt to use. Now, this is an easy one. Hemorrhages. Anywhere in the body, do you have a hemorrhage? Nosebleed? Somebody who lives with you has he's got a nosebleed. Well, just go get the ferrum phos. Give him ferrum phos every 5 minutes until it starts to get slower. Okay, it's slowing down. Well, go to 15 minutes now and give the cell salt. Okay, now it's really slow. Now go to every 30 minutes just to make sure. That's called finishing the case. Don't leave it hanging in the air and hope it doesn't come back, because with cell salts, you don't have to worry about overdosing. There's no toxicity. That's another beauty of cell salts. No toxicity. So if your daughter calls you and she just gave birth and the baby is only a week or 2 weeks old, you don't have to, oh no, gosh, it's only 2 weeks old, I can't give cell salts. No, that's not true. You can give a 1 day old baby cell salts. That's how non-toxic they are. And I've told this story before, this anecdote before. This was, it made a very profound impression on me. About 40 years ago, one of my clients called me, said she had given birth a few days before, and there was something going on with the baby's breathing, and they wouldn't let her go home with the baby because there was something going on with the breathing. And they wanted to do a spinal tap that afternoon because they couldn't figure out what it was. So they were going to do a spinal tap. This baby is 3 days old, and they're going to do a spinal tap, and she's freaking out, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. So I asked, well, what were the symptoms? And to tell you the truth, I don't remember the symptoms, but I do remember what I gave. I do remember it was mag phos and calc phos. For whatever reasons, I chose those two cell salts. I said, go ahead, go to the health food store, get those two cell salts, and just dissolve them in water and give it to the baby by eyedropper. Let's start off every 15 minutes with this. I don't remember if I mixed them together or I gave them separately. I don't remember if I used them in alternation or together at the same time. And within an hour, the baby was normal, and they went home that afternoon and avoided the spinal tap. Now, you can use cell salts very effectively with cats and dogs, more effectively than you can use them with people, because there's no psychical resistance. They're not fighting you. They don't have a lot of emotional things going on in their mind that resist any type of healing. You give cell salts to a cat and by eyedropper, or to a dog, and within 5 minutes, they're beginning to change. It's that fast. You can dissolve them and put them in their water, so they drink them all day. Something is going on. And I believe, here's that section I was telling you about. This is an entire section that tells you how to figure out and make a blend based upon which cell salts you need. And it goes through it step by step by step. It explains everything of how it's done. The entire method is explained for you here. Sure, it's long, but it's not hard. It's just long. Okay? So I've said all I'm going to say about the cell salts for today. We'll come back to it. I'll do maybe, and another time I'll do one or another cell salt that I feel is very important for you to know about. But that's how you use the book, and that's what this book is all about. And to me, I wrote it, so I believe it. I believe it's worth its weight in gold. It's a desktop reference that you'll be using for the rest of your lives if you learn how to use cell salts.